Welcome to Schmidt List, a podcast on innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Join host Kurt Schmidt, president of Foundry, as he and his guest share valuable insights and strategies. This is the perfect opportunity to explore fresh ideas to improve yourself and your business. Come join Kurt as he interviews this week's inspiring guest.
How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Kurt.
So, Tom, tell me about Parallax. What is it and who does it work? Who uses it?
Yeah, Parallax is a tool that I wish I had while I helped build a company here in Minneapolis called Nerdery. We spent 14 years growing that business and super proud of the team and everything they did along that journey. Just, proud to say that we grew to over $85 million in annual sales in 14 years without any outside money. Though I think every year was profitable, but some years
Big deal.
Maybe not so profitable as some years. And yeah, amazing team of people. So proud of everyone. And again, Parallax is a tool I wish I had along that journey. It's a forecasting and resource planning tool designed for teams, specifically professional services organization is really the focus right now. But any organization that does resource planning on projects.
Yeah, that makes sense. So and you and I, thanks to me being fortunate to work with you in the past, this has always seemed like an unsolvable problem, Tom. What was the unlock for you where you were like, okay, I think I know how to push through this? Can you tell me about what that kernel of an idea was?
Yeah, I think that every organization that I've met with in this space has the same problem generally, that we have this cycle of too much work and then not enough work and then too much work and then not enough work. And when we're at the peak where there's too much work and not enough people to do it, we as business leaders, we scramble to figure out how to get that work done. That might be trying to find new people to hire. That might be moving around some people on projects to make it work. That might be rolling up our sleeves and doing some of it ourselves. But that focus on getting the work done and not on other things leads us to a point where we're right back down to, oh my gosh, we don't have enough work to keep everyone busy. And so what do? We scramble to figure out how to find new work. And, we work really hard, we find new work, and then we're surprised when the focus on getting new work leads to, oh my gosh, we got too much work, not able to do anything, right? And my experience is that reactive nature leads to an endless cycle. That sine wave is endless because of our switch in focus. And so in my opinion, most of us know what to do in order to fix either one of those problems on either end of the spectrum, but we're usually not pulling those levers early enough. We're usually doing it the week before, a couple of weeks before we've peaked or we've got a valley. My opinion is that we could really make this a lot easier on ourselves if we got better at looking 6, 12, 18, 24 weeks out on that. Again, we know the levers to pull. Are we pulling them early enough? Are we focused consistently enough on, generating new business or making sure that we've got enough capability and people with capacity to do the work? If you're reading to the week of or the week before just to answer that question, it's too late.
In a lot of cases, Tom, and you and I have lived this, that's all the data you have is a few weeks out sometimes. So how does Parallax help me think about that in a longer term vision, or help me get that vision together? Yeah,
I think that we could talk about Parallax some other time, but I think philosophically, what I would tell you is that most organizations, whether you're an agency, a consultancy, a software shop, if you're a SaaS company building a product, what most of us aren't doing that I think we should is really treating forecasting like a team sport. They usually have people who are sitting in the back office or up in their ivory tower, what I like to say, interrogating the business to try to figure out where we're going or where we've been. We're pulling data from disparate systems. We're pontificating and saying, I think this is where we're going. But the truth is that comes with a lot of bias. It's a lot of work. By the time you get any information through that interrogation, it's really retroactive. Usually it's not proactive at all. And though I think that I understand why. We hire these people on the front line, whether they're salespeople or project managers or people that are really close to the business. And we think that they're really good at project management or they're really good at sales, but they don't really understand how all of that comes together in a big picture. And so that's why I'm the forecasting person, right? Because I understand that wider angle view of the business. The truth is, though, they probably know closer to the business what's actually happening more frequently, right? If you could just give them that wider angle view and engage them in that forecasting process, you're going to get much better foresight, right? So what I believe is empower those smart people that you've hired in these roles and teach them how to forecast in your business, whether that's on the project level. If you're a SaaS company, that's like what the new features or the things in the roadmap, the epics, the spreads. Teach those people on the front line how to communicate to the rest of the business where they see our resources being utilized over time. Again, 6, 12, 18, 24 weeks out, not just this week and next week. Teach the people in new business how to think about those new opportunities in a more rough shape of what a resource plan would look like, and teach them to tell us more frequently and more consistently where they see the business going. Build that team up to be the source of truth for where our forecast is instead of interrogating that on a...
Yeah, and how many, and you've lived this, Tom, and I've lived this, and I can tell that anybody listening to this has been through this, is that how many times have you been, here, you run into like a side conversation that could cost tens of thousands of dollars if you weren't there to make a decision in that thing. So the story we end up telling ourselves is, oh my gosh, I have to get more involved because I need to be there for those things, where versus what you're saying is, instead of those side conversations being side conversations, they are consistent, regular data points that are coming into the system, right?
Yeah, and I think that you got to, first of all, at some point we could talk about the fidelity of those inputs, because I think people are trying to do way too high fidelity of forecasting. Yeah. So I'm talking about lower fidelity, a 10,000 foot view in some cases, forecast on a project or the new business level. But I think what you're describing is like a super common problem with like founders or early operators where, when they start the company and they're small, maybe 15, 25 people, like they're really proud of the fact that they like wear all the hats. Like I do those sales, and I do the project management hat, and sometimes I even write code, whatever. And that's great to get you to the point where you can start to focus on being consistent in operations. I also find myself a multi-hat wearing leader sometimes. I think the problem is, though, over the first few years of the business, when you're successful and you're starting to create this momentum, really the multiple hats thing is really about switching focus a lot, because you don't ever wear all the hats. You put one hat on, right, for 30 minutes, then you switch the other hat for 40 minutes. That switching of focus is really effective when you're small. It can be, especially when you're a small team that's tightly integrated and communication's easy and cheap. But as the business grows, it's harder to communicate. It's harder to switch focus, and like the demands of you as a leader, they should change such that you can't be switching your focus so frequently. You can't wear 10 hats anymore. You shouldn't, right? But if we don't very deliberately create processes to change the way that those leaders are acting, they're going to continue to gravitate towards what really feels like to them like heroic effort. Like they're the hero that come in and help. Like you're at the water cooler, you overhear this conversation as you described it. I'm going to say, hey, I can help with that. Have you considered? I'm so glad we were able to talk about this. And you're like, heck yeah, I just freaking saved the day. And the team might be like every time he gets involved, it's like more complicated now. Like, how do we see this through? And like that heroic effort, like that cannot feel like positive contribution to the team, number one. Probably because you don't have the context that you thought you had in that like brief like interchange of the water cooler. Also because they might have momentum towards a different solution that didn't consider whatever you were talking about, whatever. Like the bottom line is like heroic effort doesn't scale. Like it's not going to work, right? And it doesn't feel like heroic effort to them. It feels like you're the seagull who's like flies in and, swoops down and shits all over everybody, right? Like you don't want to be the seagull leader. You want to be someone who's like really, truly out in front. I think what we want to be as leaders, what I want to be is a coach. I want opportunity to like steer them in a direction that I see without being condescending, without being too far off of where they're already taking it with their momentum and their foresight. I want an opportunity to see these problems or like potential really cool things that could happen with enough time to take a coaching approach instead of that hero approach, right?
Sure.
For example, like if the organization, if I could foresee that 12 weeks out, we're going to take a big dip in utilization for one of the roles or capabilities, if I could see that 12 weeks out as a COO or founder, in my next check-in with that in sales, I could say, hey, what do you think about the forecast out 12 weeks? And just leave it at that and see what she says. Like, or she react to that. And maybe she's got some ideas and she's going to think about it. But then the next time we meet 2 weeks later, now it's 10 weeks out. If she's still needs a little attention, maybe still, I might change my approach to be a little bit more direct and say, hey, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. You said you were going to work on this. Have you considered this? Like, taking that a coach approach is easy when you can see 12, 10, 8 weeks out. Right. But when it's this week and we're out of work, it's really hard not to be that what feels like the seagull leader and say, I can help. I'm a hero. I'm going to find us a quick project that can fill in that gap in capacity because we have to fill it in this week. Or even worse, I'm going to come in and meddle with like your distribution of people over projects to try to maximize their utilization as a CEO. Something silly like that. Like, we can't do that. But you can't really blame the CEO of having that behavior if everything's a surprise to our organization, right? If they've been saying, we look good on utilization for 6 weeks, and then all of a sudden the week of, we're like, oh crap, nope, we're like 50%. It's hard not to be reactive when there's surprises, right? So how do you predict the future more consistently, more accurately to give your senior leaders that opportunity to coach? That's the question.
Yeah, I think that can be really transformative to a culture, to have that sort of mentality about thinking out that far further. But as you and I both know, and I want to play the antagonist here a little bit, a lot of these companies are started by craftspeople, right? And if it's not real, it's not real. So if I have to make up in my crystal ball, Tom, that this client's going to sign on for another 10 weeks or this client's going to go away, and it's really hard for me to think that way. Do you also find that, or are people more open to that idea of what you were talking about, the idea of shaping the future based on experience versus hard data?
Yeah, one of our mutual former colleagues, Chris Safransky, taught me a quote one time that I use quite a bit. Albert Einstein said that you shouldn't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. And meaning that like people are different, like you said, and they might have different approaches to the world or business or whatever. And so I think that we do run into the problem, especially like in product or project or program management, like in the people who they strive to be the person that helps you understand not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. I think the sign of a good, I don't mean to conflate the two roles too much, but the sign of a good like program, project, product manager is on a spectrum of like always telling you what you want to hear versus always telling what you need to hear. They're closer to what we need to hear side, right? Yeah. It is a stretch for them to say, okay, except for in this forecasting scenario, what we need to hear is your best guess. And it's not supposed to be precise. It's not supposed to be
to the decimal.
Decimal. It doesn't need to be like padded for like how do I say this? No sandbag, right? Don't give me the absolute best case. Give me like your actual expected case or the worst case. Give me a good guess with your best guess, right? It sometimes is hard for those folks that are at the front line to adopt that mentality of this isn't supposed to be precise. It's supposed to be directionally correct. And I really do want your best guess. And I'm okay if it's wrong. And on the first side, I think that I like to say that it's a precision that we're trying to do, maybe on the hour per day or whatever. Precision can be the enemy of accuracy if it's really hard to look forward to distance that is useful. It also is really hard to be consistent and frequent in updating our best guess when we're trying to break down a day by 2 and 3 or 4 hour blocks, right? I want to see it by week. Is it half-time, full-time, for example, on a forecast? So lowering the expectation for a level of precision, but raising the expectation for like how far out we want to forecast and how frequent we want to update those forecasts, at least weekly, as far out as the engagement is currently scheduled and with what you think the next engagement will be. You're right. It takes some work to get them to adopt that methodology or that mentality. But usually like just, talking them into this is a forecast. This is not a budget.
Right.
Those are two different things. Like budget, we're going to probably put a spend against. Forecast, we're going to use to help make decisions, and we're going to maybe set some strategy and start to guide our internal focus a bit.
Yeah, and that's where I feel lucky, because with my company, we've done that forecasting, and where I really see the value in it sometimes is when maybe that project manager or that product person says, I think the client is thinking about winding down in 12 weeks or something, right? Oh, okay. How can we get more data around that than what maybe you have? And that's where, as a team now, you're reacting to this future opportunity versus reacting to all of a sudden the client has showed up 12 weeks from now and wound down, and now you're scrambling to find things. But because you're asking them to bring that data, it allows for me to say, you know what, maybe I should take the CEO for coffee just to get a temperature check on how they're feeling about stuff. And maybe we approach it in different ways, right?
I think it could be like that simple, where you're saying like, hey, my expectation is that we enter a new sales opportunity for any engagement that might renew, even if we think there's a small chance of renewal, but just put it in that earliest stage, and let's that create the indication to the sales team that like, this one needs some focus, this one needs some attention. Somebody needs to build a strategy to go get this extension. And if that, depending on how your org works, like that could be different roles, whatever. But we've also said a bunch in the past, like hope is not a plan, right? Like you got to put some level of visibility into what your expectation is. Well, you are going to be very reactive to, oh crap, I forgot to tell you, they're going to wind down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to, you also hammered on the point of consistency in that conversation. Yep. This can be, when we have something to talk about, we'll meet, right? It's got to be, I don't care if I'm hearing the 90% of the conversation is the same thing that I heard last week. That just tells me we're still on track, right? Yep. Because how many times have you had people like, I've got nothing new to share, so we don't need to talk. They're like, no, we should still do that.
I think that what is going to help the organization drive consistency is to have visibility that creates urgency, right? I think that in this reactive nature that we all start from, when we're really reliant on heroic effort of individuals, it's this daily triage that keeps us, being reactive, because every single day we're like, oh crap, this thing's coming up, I got to fix it today. But like, to your point right here on a renewal, we should have known from the day the contract was signed that there was a renewal due in a year. Yeah. And so why is that kind of not part of our regular rhythm to know in a given month, how many renewals do we have coming up next month? And what are we going to do to make sure that we hit those, right? There's a little bit of like easy process that you can create around that, like foresight, that will help us drop our reactive nature in a more proactive manner. Yep. If I had a report and a rhythm that every month, again, I looked and said, what renewals do we have next month? It's not long before you have a pretty consistent process around like trying to like triage those renewals that are coming out next month, instead of triaging the fact that, oh my God, this one's coming due next week. Whatever the right time horizon is for you, but these, creating the visibility, creating the business rhythms where you're looking at the data that you have, will automatically, it'll create new opportunity for you to have those more consistent rhythms pretty easily.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because again, I think Parallax is fantastic. It's an amazing tool. But like you said, any tool is only as good as how you use it.
Yeah, I think that like the other products out there in the market, that's why I said back to philosophy, less about my product. But I think the reason I wanted to build Parallax is because all the other products out there were built for the person in the ivory tower who's
the command and control.
Yeah, command and control leader. And I just think that's old school. It's not valuable anymore. And so it's more important to me to, again, teach these people at the front line, whether they're account manager, product manager, whatever, tell the business because you know better than that person in the ivory tower, right? Of what you see right now. And then the leadership team, with that level of foresight, we can create those like business rhythms that's using the data to inform our focus. We have that reactive mentality that's built in. You don't need to create that, but what's influencing it? Is it just what you overhear at the water cooler? Or is it a meeting that you look at a similar report every week that's looking out 6, 12, 18, 24 weeks? And it's like drawing your attention to things that you could actually influence as a leader. Where I'm focused on the things that I should have an ability to influence through coaching, the less I'm in the weeds or doing the swoop and poop leadership.
Yeah.
But the team has to help me get there, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it is true that like our project managers or our salespeople might not be naturally inclined to think this way, to think forecast oriented in the bigger picture among our whole agency. They might be better equipped to be great product managers or project managers or account managers or salespeople. But we can widen their T's, if you will, like the old skill set. Are you a deep T, really good at PM? Or are you a wide T, good at lots of things, but not maybe as good at anything specialty? Like we know they usually come to us pretty deep in their skill and specialty. We can widen their perspective. We can give them a wider angle view of the business. And we can teach them how to be forecasting. That's what my goal is, right? With the product and the way that we approach the market. And honestly, like in all my thought leadership, I personally aspired to be a coach rather than command and control leader. And so I'm trying to build a product for other people to think like me.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who start agencies are people that want to break that cycle. They want a good culture. But again, the business can suck you into that role very quickly if you're again, like you said, if you're not thinking about it from a long-term perspective, if you're only thinking about what does tomorrow bring,
yeah,
right?
And without some visibility that you're confident in, it's hard not to be thinking in that, what is next week? What is this week? But if, for example, if our revenue forecast for December was really low, even lower than seasonally low, like a lot of CEOs would be panicked and we got to fix that because I need to make payroll, right? But if you're looking at the forecast, you say, yeah, it's unseasonably, even with seasonality, it's low. But behind it, January, February, March are just like huge forecasted revenue months. Yep. You're going to be like, look, it's all good. Like, I'm not going to just the whole business trying to solve this month, which it's too late. I would have maybe redeploy some of those underutilized resources to help us build out the marketing material for a new service offering, or maybe to encourage a few people who haven't used their vacation to go ahead and take this opportunity.
I've got lots of levers I could pull.
Right. Yeah. But if you're in that like hero mode where you're really worried about everyone's jobs, like it's hard not to say, let's shift some things around. Let's try to pull some projects forward to get more revenue in December. It's hard not to be reactive when you don't have the confidence of foresight.
Yeah. And to your point, it can't just be, you've got to get your team involved 100%. And get them comfortable with all of that. Right. And if your team isn't comfortable with those things, you've got to make sure that you're building a team towards that mentality. Otherwise your team can hold you back too.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. And especially like we talked about earlier, if you're taking someone like a project manager who's naturally inclined to try to be really precise and you're trying to teach them to be in a forecasting mindset, it's going to take some work through that transition. And you're going to need to coach them on the feedback loop. Look, at your level of precision, it was hard probably for you to get all those projects done last week to find your resource plans, right? And so how accurate were they really when you didn't really have time to get through all of them? Yeah. What if I asked you, like, stop trying to be so precise and only do the 25%, 50%, 100% and go out as far as the future? Could you do that? And then let's look at the feedback loop the next few weeks and see how far off your like more high level estimates were. They're going to find over time that there's an insignificant variance when they learn to forecast better.
Yeah. And what I appreciate about your leadership, Tom, was that you are a person that would do the work with them. You wouldn't necessarily just be like, all right, go and let me see if you did a good job. But you would whiteboard with people and do those things. And I think that's a super big part about how you're getting people, how you can get people to these things to these places is by showing them what good looks like or showing them what okay is. It isn't just go and show me what you got.
I appreciate that compliment. And I hope to say that, like, when I'm at my best, that is true. That's how I act, as well as I do. That when I'm at my worst and I feel like I'm back to the wall, I can be pretty dictator pretty quick.
Oh, sure.
If I'm panicked and I'm trying to make sure it gets paid, I could be pretty deliberate about directing people to where I think they need to.
Of course.
And that's not good. I don't want to be in that mode. I think, again, if I were coaching these people, what I'm trying to coach my team here is, in order to be consistent and frequent in the way that we're forecasting, whether we're forecasting revenue or margin or utilization, whatever we're forecasting, It's about frequency and consistency. It's not about precision. Warren Buffett has a famous quote I recently learned from one of our employees that he's like, Tom, you need to use this one because it's exactly aligned with what you always say. So totally stolen it. But yeah, Buffett said that it's better to be, hold on, you're going to have to edit this out so I get it right. Yeah, Warren Buffett said that it's better to be approximately right than precisely wrong. And I think that a lot of times we work so hard to get to level of precision, we are not frequent and consistent in the way that we're estimating. So like approximation can be a lot more valuable than precision. And if we learn how to use it, and again, teaching those people on the front line, whether they're sales or the head of a department or capability, or those people that are product, project, program managers, like let's dial back our expectation of precision, but dial up our expectation for frequency and consistency. And you're going to have really accurate forecasting that is not a budget. It doesn't have to be that precise. Like it's a forecast. So it's right. That like a super important.
But I think it also changes, and this is where I've seen in our business is that as we've shaped things further out, I think it also helps with the conversations that the project managers and people like that of that nature, even the salespeople, are having with the clients in the moment, because they have that sort of mentality about, I'm going to be forecasting this. Instead of waiting till the client brings it up, I can feel a little empowered now to bring that up in this conversation, to ask them, what are you thinking about next month for this and whatever, versus being on the receiving end of only that. So I think it's not only a positive for the business to forecast, but I think it's also a positive for in the relationship with the client is to be thinking out ahead for them as well.
100%. I think a big example of a use case that kind of stands in the way of adopting this methodology sometimes is people will say, we can never predict like when the customer is going to stall, and then 2 weeks we have to wait for feedback to come back or something like that. And I usually try to say back to those folks, they ask me like, well, does that happen frequently in your projects? And they're like, oh yeah, all the time. Frequent enough that you might even be able to foresee that might happen. Yeah. These freaking customers are so crazy. I'm like, dude, so if you could foresee that happening, is there a way that you could get out of it and say, hey, if we don't do X and Y and Z by today, then our team's going to have to shift onto something else, and it's going to cross. Usually when I kind of talk through that scenario, they're like, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Yes, we probably.
Oh, yeah. No, you can track crazy. You can track crazy.
I think so. And you're never going to get 100% of your customers complied to what best practices are. But let's talk about getting 80% there. I think
for sure.
I think that, and then another like scenario that might come up as part of this is, man, that's a lot of work, Tom, to expect all of our project managers to be ahead of that with certain customers. And I'm like, how many projects do you expect a project manager to have at any given time? And they might say 12. And I'm like, whoa. And of course, you have a lot of surprises when there's 12 projects.
Yeah, I bet you do.
How could you trick that? And they'll say, well, we can't because whatever. But you can, if you can figure out how to sell it and you learn how to start selling it, and then you can forecast out that what's in the sales pipeline, what you have today, like will pay for more PMs. Yep. It'll help you feel more comfortable making that investment for 1 or 2 or 3 PMs more eventually. I think, but without like forecasting and doing the math, whether it's a PM or a designer or whatever, you're always going to be relying on that like gut instinct. And unfortunately, I should say, your gut instinct got you here, and you should be very proud of that. It's really hard to get where you probably are, right? But then understand that your gut instincts can be misleading now because you're a different size. There's different market indicators of different things. The customers are buying a different way from when you started the business and developed those instincts. You need to use data to augment your gut instincts to help you make decisions that you wouldn't make otherwise. Like investing in that new talent that you might have said, let's wait a little bit longer because my gut says I'm not sure. Investing in a new capability that is growing faster than you can see with the limited view of the data we've seen looking backwards. How are you building new gut instincts other than just reacting to the thing that comes across your desk? You should be doing that from the front line backwards to you rather than the stuff that flares up and the stuff that's an exception.
Yep. No, I think that's a great point, Tom. And we could talk for days about how even though you have all the estimates and you have all the knowledge that to try and stick the landing on that budget is really hard too. So you're forecasting in a lot of ways more so than you may think you are, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Tom, I'm going to let you go. And thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know you're a busy guy. Congratulations on all the success. If I want to get more info on Parallax, I know you guys do a lot of thought leadership work. You got a lot of great content out there for agency owners, a lot of freebies and training and all that stuff. Where do I go and get all that stuff?
Getparallax.com.
Awesome. That's great. And then Tom, what big plans do you got for the rest of the year? Are you going doing some snowboarding here soon?
Oh yeah, our snowboarding club kicks off in a couple of weeks. We got 46 members, I think, this year.
Wow.
Well, the Bent Oxen. So Minneapolis people, if you guys snowboard at Buck Hill or Highland or Wild Mountain, like we'll see you out there. Bent Oxen.
Awesome. That's awesome. All right, Tom, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Likewise. Thank you, Kurt.
We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode of Schmidt List. The stories shared by our guests are genuinely inspiring and offer insightful knowledge. It's important to remember that success doesn't happen overnight and requires collaboration, learning, and perseverance. If you want to broaden your professional connections, check out Kurt's book, The Little Book of Networking: How to Build Your Career One Conversation at a Time, on Amazon. Please stay connected with all things Schmidt List on social media, leave a review for the podcast, and join our community of like-minded entrepreneurs. Thank you for being part of Schmidt List. Keep innovating, collaborating, and chasing your entrepreneurial dreams.